At 8:15 in the morning, a white flash erased Hiroshima around Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Burned, bleeding and half-deaf, he somehow escaped the city. He found a train home, and 3 days later, while explaining to his boss how one bomb had destroyed an entire city, the room filled with the same white light. Yamaguchi had gone home to Nagasaki. This sounds like a story invented to make coincidence feel cruel. It is not. Tsutomu Yamaguchi lived through both atomic bombings and survived for another 64 years. But the version repeated online leaves out the most important part. He was not the only person believed to have survived both attacks. He was the only one officially recognized by Japan as having been directly exposed in both cities. In the summer of 1945, Yamaguchi was 29 years old. He lived in Nagasaki with his wife, Hisako, and their infant son. He worked as a naval engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, designing oil tankers at a time when Japan's war was closing in from every direction. Mitsubishi had sent him to Hiroshima for a 3-month assignment. By Monday, August 6th, the work was finally complete. Yamaguchi and 2 colleagues were preparing to leave. He expected to be home with his family soon. At 8:15, an American B-29 called Enola Gay released a uranium bomb above the city. Yamaguchi was roughly 3 kilometers from the center of the explosion. He saw the aircraft. Then he noticed 2 small objects falling beneath it. The sky became light. Yamaguchi later described an enormous flash, followed by heat and force. His training took over. He threw himself into an irrigation ditch and covered his eyes and ears. The blast wave lifted him from the ground. When he regained awareness, the morning had turned dark beneath a rising cloud of dust and debris. His eardrums were ruptured. His face and arms were badly burned. For a time, he could hear almost nothing. All around him, the familiar city had become a landscape of fire, broken buildings and people searching for help that barely existed. The bomb had not simply struck one place. It had shattered roads, hospitals, communications, and the systems needed to rescue the wounded. Tens of thousands were dead or dying. Many who appeared uninjured had already received doses of radiation no doctor could see. Yamaguchi found his colleagues, Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyashi Sato. They had survived too. The men spent the night in an air raid shelter, surrounded by the injured. Then Yamaguchi made a decision that seems impossible only because the alternative was worse. He would go home. Hiroshima Station was damaged, but trains were moving again. On August 7th, wrapped in bandages, Yamaguchi joined other burned and stunned passengers on an evacuation train heading west. The journey to Nagasaki took hours. No one aboard could know that they were traveling toward the target of the next atomic mission. He reached Nagasaki on August 8th and went to a hospital. His injuries were treated as well as the overwhelmed staff could manage. Then he returned to his family. His wife barely recognized the burned man at the door. Yamaguchi had every reason to remain in bed. Instead, on the morning of August 9th, he reported to Mitsubishi. In wartime Japan, duty was not an abstract idea. Workers were expected to appear, and Yamaguchi needed to tell the company what had happened to its Hiroshima operation. At the office, he described a weapon unlike anything his supervisor believed possible. One bomb, Yamaguchi said, had destroyed almost the entire city. His boss reportedly accused him of exaggerating. How could a single bomb erase Hiroshima? At 11:02, the argument ended. A plutonium bomb exploded over Nagasaki. Once again, the light came first. Once again, the pressure wave followed. Windows shattered. The room collapsed around him. Yamaguchi dropped to the floor as the bandages covering his burns were torn away. The reinforced office structure shielded him from the worst of the blast. For the second time in 72 hours, he stood up inside a ruined city. His first thought was not that he had survived twice. It was that his family was somewhere beneath the cloud. Yamaguchi crossed the devastated streets searching for them. His wife had left home to find burn ointment for him. When warning sirens sounded, she and their baby took shelter in a tunnel. That errand, made because of the injuries from Hiroshima, may have saved their lives in Nagasaki. The family was reunited, but survival was only the beginning. Yamaguchi's hair fell out. His wounds would not heal. He developed a dangerously high fever and suffered symptoms now recognized as radiation sickness. At the time, the invisible danger of fallout and radiation exposure was poorly understood. He had been exposed not once but twice, then crossed through the wreckage of both cities. The long-term damage did not belong to him alone. His wife had been exposed in Nagasaki. Their son had been an infant there. Like many survivors, the family lived with recurring illness and the fear that radiation might reveal itself years later. There was also silence. Survivors of the bombings, known in Japan as hibakusha, often faced discrimination. Employers and potential spouses sometimes feared that radiation sickness was contagious or hereditary. Many survivors concealed what had happened to them. For decades, Yamaguchi rarely spoke publicly about the 2 mornings that defined his life. He worked as a translator during the American occupation, later returned to Mitsubishi, raised a family and wrote poetry. Hiroshima and Nagasaki remained inside his private notebooks. Then, late in life, silence no longer felt acceptable. Yamaguchi began telling his story publicly. He appeared in a documentary about people who had experienced both attacks. In 2006, at the age of 90, he traveled to the United Nations and called for the abolition of nuclear weapons. He said that having survived twice gave him a responsibility to explain what those weapons actually did to human beings. In March 2009, the Japanese government formally recognized Yamaguchi as a survivor of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His identification already recorded his exposure in Nagasaki. The new recognition added Hiroshima, making his double exposure an official part of the record. Headlines called him the only man to survive both atomic bombs. That wording is powerful and misleading. Researchers believe perhaps 165 people were present in both cities and survived. Yamaguchi's colleagues Iwanaga and Sato were among people known to have experienced both. What made Yamaguchi unique was the government's formal recognition of both exposures. He never presented that status as a trophy for extraordinary luck. To him, it was evidence. Tsutomu Yamaguchi died in Nagasaki on January 4, 2010. He was 93. By then, the young engineer who had once struggled to convince his boss that a city could be destroyed by one bomb had spent his final years warning the world that it could happen again. His story is often told as one of impossible survival. The man fate tried to kill twice and failed. But that turns history into a trick of probability. Yamaguchi's life was not defined only by the 2 flashes he endured. It was defined by what he did after them. He boarded the train. He found his family. He rebuilt a life. And when he believed the world was beginning to forget, he finally broke decades of silence. 2 cities vanished around Tsutomu Yamaguchi in 3 days. He survived both. Then he spent the rest of his life making sure survival was not mistaken for safety.